Alright, so we're on page 47, 1.6, real world problems, squares and cubes. So you can see that little document they've got there. We've got 9, and it says, is the square of, well, is the square of 3. And 3 is the positive square root of 9. So if I take square root of 9, it equals 3. If I take 3 squared, that equals 9, right? All of this should be review. It's not like this is rocket science or anything, right? The other thing is, though, what about negative 3? What is negative 3 squared? What's negative 3 squared? Still 9, yeah. It's still 9. What about the square root of 9? Is that still... Is the square root of 9 still 3? Yeah. So what about negative 3? No, can I get this to be the square root of 9? Can I get that to be 3? Can I get that to be negative 3? I can? How do I do it? Ella? Okay. But there's no negative, why would I insert a negative if I don't need to? What? We know that we can do negative 3 times negative 3 is 9, but the square root of 9, like you're implying that it's positive already, right? So you cannot have the negative square, you cannot have the square root of 9 be negative 3. You can get a negative 3 here though. Here's how. If you say the negative square root of 9, then that means you're taking the square root and then you're making it negative. So the negative square root of 9 is negative 3. What if I do this, the square root of negative 9? What number times itself equals negative 9? What number times itself is negative 9? Any number? Why not? Can you multiply a number times itself and get negative? Why not? Say it again. Negative times negative is always going to be positive. Positive times positive is always going to be positive. So you would need to have something that cannot happen. So you cannot take square roots, of negative numbers. Technically, there is a form of math where you can find this. It's called non-real numbers or imaginary numbers. So it's actually 3i. I is the square root of negative 1. So if you take 3 times the square root of negative 1, you can end up getting that, but you can't take a square root of a negative number. So all this stuff you don't need to worry about until like you're at the earliest sophomore year of high school, maybe junior year of high school. But for square roots of negative numbers, for all purposes, what you need to know right now is you cannot take the square root of a negative number. On the bottom of page 47, it says, find the square root of 49. Yeah, we know it's 7. What about the negative square root of 49? Well, square root of 49 is 7, and it said find the negative square root. It's like it's got a negative 1 times this. Negative 1 times that? Okay, negative 7. Pretty simple, right? What about the negative square root of 169? What number times itself is 169? Do we know? I'll give you a clue. It's a perfect square. 11 squared is 121. 12 squared is 144. 13 squared is 169. So I put down 13, but I also need to put down negative because it is a negative square root. Wow, that was super challenging, right? Alright, turn to page 48. You're going to want to use that little table it uses right there. It tells you not just the squares, but the cubes. So 4 cubed is 64. If you want to break it up, 4 times 4 is 16, 16 times 4 is 64. But they've got all of those examples for you. So you can now instantaneously, 8 cubed is 512. The 6th graders are doing this right now, and they are really jealous that you guys have all of these right there, because they have to do all the calculations by hand. You do not have to. They've got the table there right there for you. So if I had said, hey, what is negative 4 cubed, what would you say? What? Yeah, negative 64, because I know I've got 3 negatives, 2 of them are going to cancel, I'll have 1 extra. My answer is going to be negative 64. So for any of them that they've got there, I mean, if you say, hey, what is the cube root? And yes, this means cube root. Square root is when you have nothing right here. The 2 is assumed. Cube root, it has a cube right there. So cube root of 64 is 4. But if I say the negative cube root of 64, then it becomes negative 4. Simple enough. One other, from example 25, it's got what is the cube root of 343. We look up there and we know that what number cubed is 343 on your little chart? 7. So they show there, hey, if you take 7 cubed right here, this and this cancel each other out, and that makes this go away, and so then you just have 7. The last thing, okay, it's not quite the last thing, the almost last thing is, what about finding the cube root of 1 over, I should say cube root of 1 over 729? What do I do with that? Yeah, cube root of 1 over 729. It's still what? First clue. Look at your chart. 729 is on that chart. We're almost done. 1 over 9? Yes, you're right. Now, why is it 1 over 9? Well, you can take cube root and put it over 1. You can take cube root and put it over 729. Just like before when I told you, hey, you've got 1/4 to the 3rd power, you can take that 3 and distribute that cube and distribute it to the 3 and to the 4, so it's 1 cubed over 4 cubed. Same thing here. If you've got the cube root of 1 over 729, you can distribute that cube to the cube root of 1 over the cube root of 729, which gives you 1 over 9. Negatives work out the same way, and the last thing, page 49, I'm just going to go over this really quickly, is, so A has x squared equals 4.41. If you don't know what that is, use your calculator if it allows you to. I'm okay with it on this one. Did I say x squared? Yeah, so you need to find, hey, what's the square root of 441? Well, it is 200, so if I say the square root of 441, that's 21. So if the decimal point is here, then now the decimal point is going to be here. It is 2.1. It's actually, sorry, plus or minus 2.1. The plus or minus is really important to hold on to, because it tells you that the answer could be positive or it could be negative. Are you going to include the plus or minus? So the plus and minus is always on your answers for when you're squaring a number. Is it always on there for if you're finding the cube root? No, why not, Emma? Yep, the negative and positive change, because you've got that extra number in there, so it's always going to be positive or always going to be negative for cube root. For square root, it is not. For square root, it's always going to be positive and negative, because you can always have the 2 positives that work together or the 2 negatives that cancel each other out. If you've got the cube root of 1,000, well, what number times itself 3 times? It's going to be 10. You've got that x squared equals 2.25. All right, take the square root of both of them. Well, what number times itself is gonna equal 2.25? It is 1.5. Or just think 225, what number? Take the square root of 225, you can use your calculator. Take the square root of 225, you get 15. And then last one is number 4 on page 50. We've got x cubed equals 1/8. Take the cube root. Take the cube root. X equals 1/2, because you can distribute again. You know the cube root of 8 is 2. X equals 1/2. Is it plus or minus? Plus or minus, or both? What? Nope, it's not both, because this is a positive cube root. Remember, cube is always going to be either positive or negative. Square root, it can be either one. Carlos, can you turn that off?
And we're going up.